Welcome, everyone. We're going to start things off this morning by singing hymn number 1023. So if you would like to join us in body and spirit, please do.
Good morning. Welcome. Hi, my name is Kathy Swenson, and my pronouns are she, her. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Manhattan. Our greeter today is Shirley. You've met her in the back. And on Zoom is Linda Johnson. And visitors and newcomers, please know that Shirley and Linda are especially available to chat after the service, though others are as well. We are a chatty group, so just talk to anybody and they'll talk to you. And thank you to Mark Mayfield for being our tech lead this morning. Our covenant reminds us that we gather to support each other in our personal and community growth. And that this month, our theme is paying attention. Today, we will pay attention to the harms caused by white Christian nationalism and discuss ways that we can heal from it. One way we at UUFM help to address the harm in our congregation is coming together with other churches in Kansas in mutual respect and cooperation through KIFA, which is Kansas Interfaith Action. It's a multi-faith, multi-issue coalition. And today we're grateful that Reverend Dr. Mandy Todd, who is the KIFA Director of Engagement and Development, has joined us from Lindsborg, where she serves as pastor of Messiah Lutheran Church. She has examined the topic of white Christian nationalism a lot, and recently she's even led a series of studies at Messiah Lutheran Church about this topic. She will share a reflection, and then following the sharing of gratitudes, joys, and sorrows, we will continue with questions and thoughts from the congregation. That's not on the program, but after that we will have a good amount of time, hopefully. Many gratitudes, joys, and sorrows have risen this week in our lives, and you are warmly welcome to write these down for us to read later. And you can find gratitude, joys and sorrows papers in a box on a seat nearby, and we'll pick them up later during the offertory. If you're here on Zoom, we'll invite you later to type this into the chat. We always begin with a land acknowledgement, and for our land acknowledgement, we are reminded that the roots of modern white Christian nationalism lie in the doctrine of discovery, which claimed that European civilizations and Western Christianity were superior to all other cultures, races, and religions. And right in this time, we can see the glorification of those ideas in the white Christian nationalist movement. So we take this moment to acknowledge the harms caused by this doctrine in the past and today, and to acknowledge the Native American nations who belong to this land, including those who were here, those who were removed from here, those who were forcibly removed to here, and those who continue to call this area home. The Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska. We acknowledge the people who belong here, particularly the Kaw Nation in their movement to return to this, their homeland. And I think now we get to hear from Hannah with announcements. And yes, thank you, Hannah. And announcements and things that are going on, events.
Good morning, y'all. Adjusting a couple things. My name is Hannah Morgan Phelps. I'm the Office and Communications Coordinator here, and my pronouns are they, she. And as Kathy said, I have our announcements for this week. The first of those, usually the last Sunday of the month, we do our in-gathering. Not this month. A lot of the people who are needed to make that happen have various other things going on, so we're not doing our April in-gathering today. I sent out an email Friday, so hopefully y'all saw that and didn't bring things for the potluck. The next announcement is that on Saturday, April 4th, as y'all know, Isabel has been gone on sabbatical for a hot minute now. She comes back on Wednesday officially, and her first Sunday back is next Sunday on the 5th. With Isabel returning from sabbatical and eager to reconnect, they are having a tea time and book group at their home on Saturday, April 4th. For the book group, they're delighted to chat about one of their favorite book series, The Wayfarers by Becky Chambers. They'll focus on books 1 and 3, and there is information about accessing those from the library in the announcements email that was sent out yesterday. Or if you don't have that, email me and I will send it to you. Next Sunday is Easter, if you were unaware. For that, the RE team is having a little Easter egg hunt after service on Sunday. If you would like more information about that, chat with Emily. And then for my final announcement today, as you may know, we have a little fair trade shopping area over in the narthex that Anne has run for many years now. Thank you to Anne for all your work you've done on that. Anne has passed that on to Jennifer, and so now, if you would like coffee, chocolate, or want to request things, please talk to Jennifer instead of Anne. And I will now pass it to whoever is reading our chalice lighting.
Thank you, Hannah. Yes, I'm going to have the reading, short reading, or chalice lighting, and Lauren is going to light the chalice for us. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. You could light it. I didn't let me know. Okay.
Sorry, everybody, with technical difficulties.
There we go. You can go straight to that. So we have joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of light and hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. That's the music.
All right, now we are going to be singing hymn number 107, Now Sing We of the Brave of Old.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mandy Todd, and I have a story to share. If anyone of any age would like to come up and hear that story, it will also be on the screen. This is a story called Love is Powerful by Heather Dean Brewer. And it talks a little bit, good morning, thanks for coming up, about some protests and marching in the streets. Did anybody go to a protest recently? Yeah. So this might be familiar. Mari spilled her crayons onto the table. They made a messy rainbow. "What are we coloring, Mama?" she asked. Mama smiled. "A message for the world." Mari ran to the window and pressed her nose to the glass. Far below, people walked in different directions. Buses, cars, and taxis honked and grumbled down the busy street. Mari asked, "How will the whole world hear?" "They'll hear," Mama said, "because love is powerful." Mari climbed onto her Mama's lap. The crayons smelled sharp and new. Mama used one to write some letters. Even though Mama's words stretched across the poster, they would be too small for the world to read, Mari thought. Mari picked up a crayon. As she made her own sign, she imagined her friends in their apartments across the city, Grandma and Grandpa a plane ride away, and all the people in other countries. Mari wondered, how will the whole world see our message? Mama hugged her close. "They'll see," she said, "because love is powerful." This turns this way, so you gotta turn your, you don't see the slides. You have to turn your head like this. Mama handed her a coat, and then they both laced up their shoes. Mari tucked the posters under one arm and held Mama's hand with the other. They slipped through the elevator doors. Down, down, down they went, all the way to the lobby. Mari hopped onto the sidewalk, then stopped and looked up. The street was packed with people, more people than she'd ever seen in her entire life. Mari tugged on Mama's arm to ask her to kneel down. Then she whispered in Mama's ear, "Mama, it's so loud, and there's so many people. They won't hear our message." Mama said, "They will, little Mari." Mama lifted Mari up, and for a moment she felt like she was flying. On top of Mama's shoulders, Mari could see the crowd swell for blocks, hundreds and thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people marching down the street. Some held signs like Mari's, all saying different things. Everyone cheered as they walked together. Mama joined them. Mari bobbed above the crowd like a canary fluttering over trees. She felt as tall as one of the buildings. Mari raised her sign for everyone to see. Even though she was small and the crowd was very big, so big she didn't think anyone would hear, she called out her message. Though through the roar, her voice was heard, and someone shouted the message back. Mari yelled again, and more joined in. Again, she yelled the message. I think we should try it. I'll be Mari, you be the crowd, okay? Love is powerful. Love is powerful. Love is powerful. Love is powerful.
Love is powerful.
This time, when the crowd called back, Mari's message rumbled down the street and echoed off the buildings. It was as loud as breaking waves. Love is powerful. It's a pretty good story, huh? It's a true story about the author. She tells the story of when she went to her very first protest. The author, again, is Heather Dean Brewer. Thanks for sharing with me. What happens next, Kathy?
We get to sing our wonderful children to their Sunday school class, or they as they go.
Our reading this morning comes from the Christian Testament. This comes from the Gospel of Mark. Then they sent to him some Pharisees and some Herodians to trap him in what he said. And they came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with truth. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not?" But knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, "Why are you putting me to the test? Bring me a denarius and let me see it." And they brought one. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this and whose title?" They answered, "Caesar's." Jesus said to them, "Give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And they were utterly amazed at him. As Kathy said, I am the Reverend Dr. Mandy Todd. I'm the Director of Engagement for Kansas Interfaith Action. You may know us as KIFA. How many of you are familiar with KIFA? Lots of you, good. I know Reb Moti was here, our executive director, not too long ago, so hopefully you heard him as well. I am an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ, the UCC. Sometimes we jokingly call that Unitarians Considering Christ. And in addition to my work at KIFA, I also serve as pastor at Messiah Lutheran Church. It's an ELCA Lutheran congregation in Lindsborg, Kansas, where I live with my husband and my 2 kids. At Messiah this summer, we engaged in a worship and learning series entitled "What Belongs to God?" as we read together Amanda Tyler's book, How to End Christian Nationalism. The scripture text we just heard and its parallels in the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Matthew guided that worship and learning series this summer. I just want everybody to know, I did clarify with Kathy, is it okay if I read something from the New Testament? She said, yeah, it's okay. This text is a really interesting passage of scripture. So at this point, Jesus has been teaching and preaching for a while. And he's garnered a lot of attention, both positive and negative. He is going around questioning the actions of the Roman Empire and its reign of Pax Romana, Roman peace. An understanding of peace that is not the absence of war, but instead the point at which all opponents have been beaten down or killed and had therefore lost the ability to resist. So Jesus' teaching, so much of the time, we're often pointing out the discrepancies between Roman peace and divine peace, like real, actual peace. So in this passage, the Pharisees and the Herodians team up to trap Jesus with a binary question. Now, the Pharisees were the religious leaders of the Judeans, and the Herodians were a political sect of Judeans who sought to align themselves with King Herod Antipas, and therefore align themselves with the power and the might of the Roman Empire. This colluding of political and religious leadership was a problem in the first century, much as it is today. So here, in this scene, it seems that Jesus has two options, both of which will get him into trouble. If Jesus says, yes, the law allows people to pay taxes to Caesar, it calls into question the challenges Jesus has been posing to the empire through his teaching and healing and work. Permission to pay tax to the empire condones the acts of the empire. But if Jesus says, no, don't pay taxes, then he's guilty of sedition, a crime punishable by death by the empire. But here's the deal. Jesus isn't really into the binary, and so he goes a third way. He will not be forced into choosing two bad options. So he asks them for a coin. And note, Jesus doesn't take a coin out of his own pocket. He doesn't have one, presumably. On that coin is the image of Caesar, the emperor. Marked with the image of Caesar, made in the image of Caesar, it's clear that that coin belongs to Caesar. So go ahead, give it back to him. And give to God what belongs to God. So if we follow Jesus' logic here, we need to figure out what is stamped with the image of God to find out what belongs to God. In one of the creation myths in the Jewish and Christian traditions, told in the book of Genesis, we hear this. Then God said, let us make humankind in our image, to be like us. Humankind was created in God's reflection. In the divine image, God created them, female and male. God made them. This morning, I'm wearing my favorite Kifa t-shirt. It says, you can't spell imago Dei without D-E-I. In rainbow colors. Imago Dei is Latin for image of God. It's a phrase that recalls this beautiful story of creation and reminds us that human beings have the divine image stamped on our very being. Every one of us reflects the beauty of our diverse and creative universe. Every one of us is sacred. Christian nationalism would have us believe that God is a straight, white, cisgender, young, wealthy, able-bodied Christian man. And so therefore, governments should prioritize the needs of those who look like this very narrow version of God. Christian nationalists seek their own Pax Americana when all opponents have been beaten down or killed and have therefore lost the ability to resist. That's why Christian nationalists support the inhumane treatment of immigrants, attempts to erase trans and non-binary people from society, the regulation of women's bodies, the criminalization of homelessness. Christian nationalists don't see the divine image in immigrants, trans and non-binary folks, women, or the poor. But my friends, Christian nationalists are wrong. You and me, we reflect the image of the divine. Every baby ever born and every member who has ever died in this congregation reflects the image of the divine. Every immigrant, whether they have papers or not, every trans person just trying to use the bathroom, every Iranian child, every Palestinian, every one of us reflects the image of the divine. Christian nationalists would try to convince us that the opposite is true. They will try to divide us, to make us enemies. But as people of faith and conscience, we recognize the divine image in everyone, neighbor and stranger alike. And we will resist the Pax Americana that seeks to destroy the Imago Dei. Okay, so I'm going to ask you again, how many of you attended a No Kings rally yesterday? Excellent. Early estimates say that over 8 million people participated in protests across the globe, one of the largest events in history. 8 million people. Men, women, trans and non-binary folk, young kids, old people, rich, poor, US citizens, undocumented immigrants, able-bodied and differently abled, every shade of skin tone. Christian, Jew, Muslim, UU, atheist, agnostic, 8 million beautifully diverse and unique people, each marked with the Imago Dei. 8 million people. Strangers on a road, coming together as one. That's God to me. That's the divine image. And this sacred coming together as one, this is what heals us, saves us from the sin of white Christian nationalism. So today and every day, let's make it so. Amen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Linda Johnson. Sounds like an echo. Today, as many of us remember from our traditional Christian churches that we grew up in, is Palm Sunday. So I almost expected to see a group of children coming down the aisle. Universalist Fellowship is take up an offering. Our offering of money and vulnerability is a vital part of our faith. As a covenantal community, we freely choose to be here, and our voluntary giving is symbolic of that freedom of choice. Throughout the month of March, we share our gifts with our Helping Hands organization, which this month is the Wonder Workshop. Money placed in envelopes in the offering basket will go to the Wonder Workshop. Unmarked donations will go into the UUFM General Fund to support our mission. Many of us donate online to the fellowship, a Helping Hands organization, and or the Blessing Box by going to uufm.net/donate or with the QR code on your order of service. As our basket goes around, remember that generosity is about so much more than money. It's also about we show up in the world, smiling at a stranger, caring for neighbors, listening to our friends, going to a protest. When the basket comes to you, you may add any written gratitudes, joys, and sorrows. Even if you aren't putting anything in the basket today, you can pause while holding the basket as a ritual of thanks for the generosity of our world. If you're here on Zoom, now is the time to type in your gratitudes, joys, and sorrows in the chat, and turn on your camera if you'd like to be seen in the sanctuary. Let us move now into a spirit of generosity.
Text. Oh, there. Hi. This is Strangers by the Kinks. If you know the words, feel free to sing along. The chorus is Strangers on this road we are on. We are not two, we are one. Where you going? I don't mind. I've killed my world and I've killed my time. So where do I go? What do I see? I see many people coming after me. So where are you going to? I don't mind. If I live too long, I'm afraid I'll die. So I will follow you wherever you go. If your offered hand is still open to me. Strangers on this road we are on. We are not two, we are one. So you've been where I've just come, from the land that brings losers on. So we will share this road we walk, and mind our mouths and beware our talk. To peace we find, tell you what I'll do, and all the things I own I'll share with you. If I feel tomorrow like I feel today, we'll take what we want, give the rest away. Strangers on this road we are on. We are not two, we are one. Holy men and holy priests, this love of life makes me weak in my knees. And when we get there, make your play, 'cause soon I feel you're gonna carry us away. In a promised lie you made us believe. For many men there's so much grief. And my mind is proud but it aches with rage. If I live too long I'm afraid I'll die. Strangers on this road we are on. We are not two, we are one. Strangers on this road we are on. We are not two, we are one.
Thanks, Renee. Hello, my name is Katie Lee Smith, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a member of the caring team and one of the people available to offer support while Pastor Isabel was away on sabbatical. We've come to the time in the service when we share our burdens and amplify our celebrations. I invite you to take a few breaths and call up a spirit of gratitude, generosity, vulnerability, courage, and compassion as Sage pours water to connect us to those who have come before. So we have some in-person gratitude.
And now we'll have some opportunity for discussion on this subject of Christian nationalism and questions or thoughts or conversation with Mandy. There. Good. Yeah.
Hi, this is Dan Swenson. I was just wondering if you could give a little bit more background of where you see the political situation now, because you talked about a very general topic, but where is it actually showing up real definitely in our country?
Yeah, absolutely. So as many of you know, KIFA does legislative advocacy at the state level. And we see some very, in our state, in the state of Kansas, some very specific connections to Christian nationalism. I'll talk about a couple of bills. Most of you, I'm sure, are aware that this session in late February, SB 244 passed. It is a bathroom ban and a driver's license bill that requires people to, on their IDs, and also use the bathrooms that match their sex assigned at birth. The Kansas legislature would say that this is just a simple conversation about biology and keeping women safe. But we see this bill as a Christian nationalist bill that, as I mentioned, really tries to define this very narrow norm of who gets to live fully and live authentically in our state. Whenever I talk about this, I think about Audre Lorde, who talked about the mythical norm, that, that long list of very specific identities that is, quote unquote, acceptable. And she would talk about how at some point, almost everyone falls out of that mythical norm, right? We value youth, we value ability, and most people in the world will get older, will have some debilitating experience, whether that's permanent or short term. There is no way to fully live into this mythical norm. But the Kansas State Legislature is trying to erase people who don't, right? So in this bill, trying to, now, you'll find no language about trans people in the bill or non-binary people in the bill, but the attempt is to limit who has access, who has privilege, right? So SB 254 is a similar bill, but the target is immigrants. It denies state benefits to undocumented immigrants in Kansas. That includes in-state tuition for young people who may have attended public schools the majority of their lives, whose families are paying taxes, whose families are working, I'm losing the word, contributing to the local economies. This bill would deny them access to in-state tuition, as well as many other benefits. This is a Christian national bill in our state legislature, right? Again, narrowing the definition of who gets privilege and access in our state. And finally, SB 363 is a budget bill that what it actually does is it codifies into the Kansas state legislature much of what was passed with the big, ugly bill in the summer, so that if that bill were deemed unconstitutional or repealed, the Kansas state parts of that would remain in place. So even if at the federal level we open it up and more people have access to SNP and Medicaid and those kind of benefits, in Kansas we would still be able to limit access. So again, a Christian nationalist bill that targets the poor. So I think, you'll never see in this legislation language that directly says, here's what we're trying to do, right? It is all this narrowing as much as we can to get to that mythical norm. So I think we see those examples in the Kansas state legislature. These are 3 bills that are, SB 244 has already become law. The other 2 are expected to pass, at least in some iteration, this session. But then we see that at the federal level, we see that at the municipal level. It is embedded throughout our government.
Yeah, the template from which I view Christian nationalism is driven by a book that's quite recent called American Idolatry. Mm-hmm. You've probably read it, The Rise of Christian Nationalism. And I'll just leave you with the 3 points that are emphasized there on how you identify our situation today and Christian nationalism. Power, fear, and violence. You apply that to any other nationalist movement of the last century and to the current situation, and you can understand what it is happening to us. So there are some remedies in this book that are given, but do you have any takeaways from it that might help us?
Yeah, well, I think that fear and division is the only way that nationalism of any kind can survive. And so, first of all, gathering in spaces like this, places with like-minded people, with people who are committed to love and justice and unity, is the antidote to fear, right? And I think you're right, they use fear to kind of manipulate and control to gain more power. So I would say that is, recognizing the fear is probably one of the first steps, because I think we can get wrapped up into it and not really even recognize what's happening so much of the time. I actually have heard of the book that you are referring to, but I don't think I've read it, but sometimes it gets muddled in there, But the book that I shared during my reflection is this Amanda Tyler's How to End Christian Nationalism. And she is very helpful. She lays out 8 steps on how to end Christian nationalism. This is the book that my congregation studied for 8 weeks this past summer. Amanda Tyler also came to our KIFA annual event in June and was our keynote speaker. Really fantastic. But I'll share for you, I printed these out because I thought it would be a question. The 8 steps. And man, I wish that you could just do these 8 steps and then we'd be done, but unfortunately that's not how it works. We learned this summer. So step 1 is name and understand the threat of Christian nationalism, right? This is the education piece. This is knowing what you're looking at. And as we were doing this study this summer, we talked about some examples of Christian nationalism that are so insidious, it actually is hard to really see them in their fullness unless you're looking for them. There are, I think this is probably less likely in your hymnals here, but there are hymns in my congregation's hymnals sitting in the pews that are rife with Christian nationalistic language, right? Onward, Christian soldiers, the battle hymn of the Republic, right? So being able to learn what it is and then name it and see it and point it out is so important. Step number 2 for Tyler is ground yourself in God's love. I think that's what we do in community together. She's coming from a Christian lens and speaks about how the language of Jesus has been completely co-opted. And so returning to what is that message of Jesus in the Christian context? What is this message of divine love? And then reclaiming it in yourself and recognizing what it is you really believe about the divine, about the universe, about who we are as human beings. Step number 3 is denounce violence. And she talks about both physical violence and also rhetorical violence, which we're seeing that play out in the comments. Many of you may have heard what, I can't remember, the Brooks something. He's a pastor in Doug Wilson's tradition, who has said he hopes that God kills James Tallarico, running for legislature in Texas. That is Christian nationalism wrapped up in this violent rhetoric that is incredibly harmful, and we can't allow that to be explained away, right? Number 4, commit to the separation of church and state. She has some really interesting data points about how when church and state get wedded to one another, both things suffer, right? I think people think, oh, well, if we make Christianity the religion of this country, Christianity will be revived, right? There are less people in our pews now, so we just need to make sure that we embed it into our lives. What the research shows is when that happens, not only does the state suffer, but the religion itself declines. It is not helpful. So really committing to the idea of the separation of church and state. Step 5, taking on Christian nationalism at home, really figuring out where's it happening. I can say this to you all because it's not true. I go to churches all over the state, and some very, very progressive churches, and they have American flags in their sanctuaries. And I think just sort of have a blind eye to it, right? So where is it happening? In your sanctuary, in your hymnals? Where are some of our old language, our old ideas infiltrating what we actually understand this faith to be about? Step 6 is about organizing for change, really working in coalitions. This is where I think the work of Kifa is so important, because we partner with all kinds of other organizations who are doing similar work. In the Kansas legislature, we could not, by ourselves, and certainly general people in the public could not actually keep track of all the shenanigans that are happening in Topeka during the legislative session. And so we partner with organizations who are watching the immigration bills, with partners who are watching the food insecurity, the Medicaid expansion, right? So we partner with all of these, and then we bring kind of the faith voice to that. But we could not do that work without being organized strategically. Step 7 is protect religious freedom in our public schools. We see this, we had the prayer about the Kansas state schools not being able to require anything that is remotely relevant to DEI. I mean, what kind of world are we living in? But her step 7 is all about how protecting schools from this infiltration is so important. And then finally, step 8 is take your place in the public square. Figure out where your place is. Like, what is it that you are being called to do, right? We're not all called to go to the rallies. Some of us can't do that. But what is your thing that you are called to do in order to fight Christian nationalism? The other thing I'll say is that she really talks about how Christian nationalism is a Christian problem, and it is the responsibility of Christians to fight it. And so that is where I feel particularly called and compelled to remind folks what Jesus actually said and what Jesus actually did. And I will not let this tradition that has meant so much to me be usurped and transformed, bastardized really, into something that it's not. So, there are lots of other good books about Christian nationalism. This is the one that my congregation has really kind of latched onto and continues to study. But I encourage you to do your own research. It's really, we did a webinar, which you can find on online, the Kifa YouTube page, with Bishop Donna Simon, who's the bishop of the this region's, and she did a history of Christian nationalism and the ways that it goes back. I mean, we think of it as a problem that is developing right now, but she connects it to hundreds of years ago, really, the formation of the nation, and even back to what we see in, as I mentioned, the Pax Romana during Jesus' time. It is something that we will continue to wrestle with probably for all of human existence. Unfortunately, that's not really a message of hope. Yes. Sorry.
I feel like in terms of addressing Christian nationalism and then also just the fascism that's happening, because at this point, they are openly disregarding national law, the Constitution. They're disregarding international law. And we are effectively living in a fascist state right now. And I think it's really interesting to look at what are we not allowed to do. So, we are allowed to protest. And I think protesting is important. I think it's, I go to the protests too. And I think it's really, really important. But one of the reasons I think it's allowed is because they have the option to just ignore us, right? It's more for us than it is for them. But that's important too. We're important. But then also I think that, we're allowed to bear arms because they know that it's not effective defense against the arms that they have. They have bombs, they don't care if people have even assault rifles because they have, what are the things that we're not allowed to do? Labor unions aren't allowed to talk to each other. Labor unions aren't allowed to coordinate strikes. Why is that illegal? It's illegal because it's effective. And I think at this point we have to start thinking about what are the things that they are afraid of, because those are the things that are possibly powerful. And I think it's really hard to get into conversations about what kinds of civil disobedience are effective because it's unsafe to talk about, right? I know that talking about it publicly and openly can make you a target, right? But at the same time, I feel like we are in this place of urgency, this place of Trump becomes more and more unhinged, and he's a narcissist, and he's having a narcissistic collapse. And those people, they don't retreat, they double down, they go harder. And I think he will burn the whole world with him. I genuinely think that he would do that before he would relinquish any kind of power. And I don't know how to reconcile just going to work and just living my life. And it feels wrong. It feels wrong to just be trying to function normally during this time. And I don't know how we can collaborate in that way.
Yeah, I feel that too. I will have these moments when I'm like, how am I making macaroni and cheese for my children right now? The world is on fire, right? Like, but I think, we in the United States have been protected from this kind of reality for a long time, right? This is what's happening in Gaza and has been for years. This is what's happening in the Ukraine and has been happening. This idea that, and it's hard to reconcile, this idea that we can live through this and also, Lord have mercy, right? So I do think that the remembering from whence we came, like imagine the Israelites in Egypt under Egyptian slavery, right? And Rabbi Moti talks about this, that this is what we do in these times. We may not see, what we may see is the world burned down. But if we can remember our stories, if we can tell our stories, whatever those stories are that are important to you, Martin Luther King, like, if we can continue to tell these stories to ourselves and to our children and to our children's children, the time will come, right, when things begin to turn. And that's not, I don't know what to say for those of us who are in this room right now. But we have to keep telling the stories. I listened to a really fantastic podcast on the way here. It was on Being with Krista Tippett, with a Jewish rabbi who talked about this idea, that we tell these stories and also wrestle with the realities of the world we're living in and the world we want to live in. And that is part of being human all the time, I think.
I think we were going to check in with Zoom first, and then... Oh, okay. So I just wanted to amplify what I was hearing about how kind of complicated it feels to be living under narcissistic abuse at the same time as this is being justified through appeals to faith, and how much harm is being done. And people in the congregation know my backstory. I'm a professor of queer studies at K-State, and I'm going to bring in my partner to alibi what I'm about to say in a way that I have not asked for consent first, so sorry about that. But she's a LGBT trauma therapist, and I'm a queer studies professor, so together I work with the crowd, and she works with the individual. I like that response. And so I think I recently taught my violence class about how domestic abusers that engage in intimate partner violence and January 6th insurrectionists have the same personality profiles. They think of themselves as the most important person in any room they walk into. They have low empathy. They kind of hit really high on narcissism scales, and oftentimes just will not stop being physically, emotionally abusive unless interventions are being made in kind of profound ways. Even though I'm a prison abolitionist, these are scenarios that incarceration sort of makes sense in order to stop abuse. And so I think part of what I'm hearing, having been raised by hippie atheists, so I have no faith background, I don't bring a Christian lens to a lot of my understanding, but I do bring like a PhD in American studies and social movements, and understand that like the assassination of Abraham Lincoln was done by a man who was pissed off that slaves were taken away, and that he was a Christian nationalist domestic who was like, I'm pissed off that you prevented me and my people from being able to enslave darker skinned people as property. And so I think there's a way that this is a really long standing trajectory of there's a particular personality profile that is feeling entitled to violence, oppression, and being able to do these kinds of things that has this ability to both promote fear, but like feel fear at a higher rate. And so for those folks, like having gone to church so many times and trying to convince them that they're hurting trans folks like me and my students in ways that they see as solution and not problem, I don't have hope to convince them to have more empathy. But I do think that there are folks that they're getting on board with their political project that we could potentially convince and not get on board if we don't keep getting them on board with how much fear mongering there is. But at this point, like, that level of kind of vitriolic fear mongering and fervor is just so omnipresent that's the part that I kind of worry about. And I'm wondering if part of the research that you've done and the work that you've done, is there any sense of like, how do we like sidestepping the narcissists that have low empathy that we can't convince, like the folks that have empathetic capacity, how do we get those folks kind of back on board with kind of being empathetic humans and kind of stepping away from this in a way that like we're still working towards common good and decency? And does that need to be linked to like liberation theology? Does that need to be linked back to like just trying to get people back into healthier communities? Like, do you have a sense of what that looks like?
Yeah, I have so many things I want to say. And I'm also aware of time, so I won't say them all. First of all, I think there is, I talked about this idea of reclaiming our religious perspectives, particularly in this case, what it means to be a Christian. When I was in doing my master's program, I wrote a paper comparing how God behaves in some places in the Bible to the book, The Battered Woman Syndrome. So I would like to really talk to you about that someday. And I think like we have to address the problems within our particular faith. Christianity is not great at its core in every single way. So when we reclaim what this means, we have to address the problems that are embedded in the, even in the sort of good parts. I think that we are, at Kifa, we have been talking a lot about the difference between winning and witnessing. We have not won in the state legislature. I mean, essentially this year, every once in a while, like something doesn't get carried to the floor and we consider that a win, and it has literally nothing to do with anything except that, so-and-so didn't like it and so they blocked it. Like we don't win very often, but we show up and we witness, and so one of the things, another piece of research in this book, and you'll hear it in other places, is that Christian nationalists are really, really loud, but they actually are not the majority. So there's a bell curve, right? About 20% of people are really committed to Christian nationalism, whether they call themselves that or not. Another 20%, I think we in this room are like, oh heck no, this is bad, bad, bad news. And then there are people who really know that much about it, but if they did, they probably would be like, oh heck no. And there's people who don't know much about it, but if they did, would be like, oh yeah, that sounds good. And then this big group who are kind of oblivious. And so one of the things that we talk about is, there's a 5-point scale, right? And Christian nationalists are a 5, and Kifa folks are 1s. And at Kifa, we are never going to change a 5's mind. We're just not. That's not our work, right? Because they are the narcissists. They are the people who, it doesn't matter if you show them how scared you are or how much you're hurting. They're like, yeah, that's good. That's what I want. Our job is to work with the 2s and the 3s, right? Those are the movable folks. And that is where the momentum and the energy lies. So I think, my husband is infamous for getting into he's a former evangelical, and he is infamous for getting into these arguments with ridiculous people who are probably actually bots on the internet, right? And he does this, and I'm like, dude, this is not the work. I mean, if you're having fun, go for it. But also, like, we have to show up in the places where we can affect change, right? And this is one of those places. The rallies are sometimes those places. Showing up at the State House, we did an action in earlier this month with the intention of getting arrested, but we were not successful. Sitting in front of the Senate after SB 244 had passed, after it had become law, we sat down in front of the Senate and said, we will witness to the immorality of this legislation. And that is the work that I think maybe can take root.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I should stop directing because you're in charge, Kathy.
Oh, no,
Go
no,
ahead.
I'm just gonna ask if there's anyone on Zoom that has something to say. We don't want to forget the people that are joining us on Zoom.
Well, Frank adds that he believes it's a long-standing trajectory, but other than that, no one has anything to say.
Thank you, Linda. Yes, and we have like one more minute, and we have one more person here, I think. So.
Thank you, Reverend Mandy, for coming out here today. I'm really glad that we're a congregation that supports Kifa so that you can go be witness to all of the terrible things. I'm sorry. I'm going to say something a little controversial and challenge this congregation in particular, that we're not Christian. So we kind of see ourselves as outside of the problem, but the problem as a whole, white Christian nationalism, even if we don't meet the Christian part. And what I want to ask people to consider, in what ways are we still perpetuating whiteness, nationalism, when we're not aware of it? So, and if that makes you feel a certain type of way, I wonder what is driving those feelings.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Katie. I have to say, you know, I most of the time when I do this conversation, it is in Christian settings. And I do think, you know, it is a Christian problem, and Christians will be the only ones who can fix it entirely, because we have to fix it within ourselves. But, you know, I think you use also sort of, I don't know if I can say this, are sort of Christian presenting, right? You come to church on Sunday morning. We're primarily white congregations, right? So what are the ways, and I think many of you probably come from Christian backgrounds, not everybody, but you know, at some point in your life, you sat in a Methodist church or whatever. So what are the ways that that work can be done from the foundation you're in? My work, as someone who still claims to be Christian, is figuring out what the heck does that actually even mean to me, and then telling every single person I can that it's not that, right? To say Christian nationalism is not Christianity, and I'm coming from the place of a Christian. I know what it means to be Christian, and it's not that. And maybe your job is, hey, we're not Christian, but we are people of faith and conscience, and there are other options for you. You don't have to go to that, you know, flag, well, American flag. You can wave other flags here, right? So maybe there's something there.
Thank you so much, Mandy.
Yeah.
It's been great. I know there's other questions also on the table to the left. There is a way to sign up to get the emails from Kifa, which are really great, especially during the session, because they keep you up on what's going on. And there's many other activities that are important on that email. And you can look them up on of course, Google it and get on it too.
Yeah,
so.
Kansas Interfaith Action is your best bet. And I'll be here for a little while after service, so if you'd like to talk more, I'm available.
Thank you.
Thank you all much.
All right, please join us in body and spirit for our final hymn today, Wake My Senses. We're just doing the first 3 verses.
Our closing words this morning come from author Cole Arthur Riley and her book, Black Liturgies. Release us from these empty cravings for unity that come at no cost to the oppressor. Lead us toward spaces of costly advocacy. We confess that in speaking up on behalf of the oppressed, we too soon become enamored with the sound of our own voices. Our egos spoil even our best intentions. Show us when the voices of the vulnerable are being drowned out by the cacophony of the privileged. Make our presence and dignity known in a world that perpetually eclipses the voices of the margins. Guide us into solidarity that demands something of us. Let us learn to risk ourselves on behalf of the vulnerable, believing that when one of us is harmed, we all are. Keep us from those who will demonize the fight in us, who would prefer us complacent and far from one another. Secure in us the courage to resist, knowing that together we will restore what the world has tried to suffocate in us.